pieces.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and I am so excited to talk to you today about one of the most iconic franchises in Hollywood history, Alien. This is the definitive history of the Alien franchise. So while everybody knows about Alien and will instantly recognize the title Xenomorph, it is kind of an unsung IP if you think about it. The Alien franchise doesn't get the same attention as, say, Star Wars, Star Trek, or the MCU, but the Alien cinematic universe has quietly been generating new stories throughout pretty much the entire modern blockbuster era of Hollywood. There has been at least one Alien movie with a wide theatrical release in each of the last 6 decades.
Damn!
So today I'm going to go through the definitive history of the Alien franchise, covering every single movie, as well as many of the novels, comics, video games, and more that have contributed to the ever-evolving world building of the series. Now, I'm not going to give a scene-by-scene plot breakdown of these stories. You don't need me to remind you of the series' most iconic scenes and moments, like...
Game over, man! It's game over!
And of course, this.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
We're also going to talk about the underlying themes of the franchise, as well as its origins and hugely impactful influences on sci-fi and Hollywood movies as a whole. Because Alien is more than just a bunch of monster movies. While they all have some form of the Xenomorph in common, these stories are wide-ranging in the stories they tell, characters and settings they cover, the themes they inhabit, and even their genre. While they're all usually some form of horror, they differ in the types of horror. Some are closer to slasher movies, while others are more psychological horror. Some are pretty much just straight-up dumb action movies. And before we get rolling here, guys, I want to show you these really fun new Alien parody shirts that we just designed for our merch store. We have Aliens Playing Poker, a play on dogs playing poker with some of your favorite aliens from pop culture, and this Aliens parody of the famous Abbey Road cover showing the evolution from egg to Xenomorph. Shopping our merch store really is the best way to directly support our channel. We love making these shirts for you guys. You can find links for them down below. Now, back to Alien. So, let's start at the very beginning, when the idea of Alien was still just an unhatched egg in the mind of a couple relatively unknown screenwriters, Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. O'Bannon, who is mostly behind the original idea of Alien, had already written the 1974 John Carpenter film Dark Star. Dark Star was a low-budget, independent sci-fi comedy about a ragtag crew of a spaceship a couple hundred years in the future who have to deal with a very inhuman alien monster on board. Sound familiar? Together, O'Bannon and Shusett wrote a more dramatic version of this story titled Star Beast, which was based on some earlier story ideas that O'Bannon had, combined with Shusett's idea of World War II-like gremlins taking apart a spaceship. Other stated influences on the script were Forbidden Planet, Planet of the Vampires, and the original Thing from Another World, as well as H.P. Lovecraft and the pulpy EC Comics. O'Bannon wasn't crazy about the title, and eventually changed it to Alien because of how many times that word appeared in the script. Like his previous film Dark Star, Alien was intended to be shot on a shoestring budget like most genre films at the time. However, the success of another movie at the time changed everything, and that movie was called Star Wars.
and the Bandit.
What? No, not Smokey and the Bandit, Star Wars. Star Wars changed everything. Not only did it, along with Jaws, begin the blockbuster era of Hollywood filmmaking, but it also showed that audiences were hungry for big flash science fiction sagas. A ton of space set movies followed in the wake of Star Wars, from total ripoffs like Battle Beyond the Stars to franchise resurrections like Star Trek the Motion Picture. 20th Century Fox, which already had the rights to distribute Star Beast, decided to give it a much bigger budget so that it could join these post-Star Wars blockbusters. Fox considered a few different big directors to shoot Alien, including Robert Altman and John Borman, who had recently had success with Deliverance. The producers ended up going with Ridley Scott, who seemed more interested in treating the material more than just another B-movie monster flick. Changes were made to the script, including its lead character, Ripley. Originally, Ripley was male, with all the other characters with Tom Skerritt set to play the lead. Tom Skerritt ended up playing Captain Dallas, while Ripley was changed to a woman. Sigourney Weaver, who had a few small film roles at this point, was cast as Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley. At one point, Meryl Streep was considered for the role, but producers never even asked her because she had recently lost her close romantic partner, actor John Cazale, to cancer. At this point, it wouldn't really make sense to talk about the world building of the Alien franchise, which obviously began with this movie, without talking about Dune. Way before Denis Villeneuve adapted Frank Herbert's novel into 2 amazing blockbuster films, and even before David Lynch made his psychedelic 80s version, avant-garde filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky worked for years on a big-budget version of Dune that never got made. The documentary, Jodorowsky's Dune, does a good job detailing exactly how he assembled a team of writers, artists, and special effects wizards to create a movie unlike any other.
The movement of the camera, dialogue,
designing the spaceships, the clothes, the whole look of his world.
the castle. Open the mouth. The spaceship came in the tongue.
Which is partly why it never got made. One of the writers he brought on was Dan O'Bannon, who got to know the other artists Jodorowsky brought on to Dune, including Chris Foss, H.R. Geiger, and Jean Mobius Giraud. These guys had these weird, trippy aesthetics that really stuck with O'Bannon. Many of their designs ended up being incorporated into the look and visual language of Alien, as well as other influential works like Blade Runner. The art of H.R. Geiger, a Swiss artist, really influenced O'Bannon in particular. His style meshed human anatomy with machines, creating these alien-like biomechanical creatures. Geiger was hired by the production and ended up designing the iconic Xenomorph alien, as well as the facehugger and other alien designs. Now, just to be clear, Ridley Scott didn't just point the camera and shoot. He was also hugely influential on the look and feel of the first Alien movie, and by extension, the entire franchise. Scott is a visual artist himself, and he would draw his own storyboards and design the Nostromo spaceship and the spacesuits worn by the crew. Scott said that he was influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Wars. He was also inspired by the lived-in, junky look of the Millennium Falcon and other parts of the Star Wars galaxy. After Alien became a massive hit, the idea of space truckers became a genre in itself, and is a common way for movies to depict space travel in the future and near future. But at the time, this was relatively novel, and a testament to just how influential Alien was on the rest of Hollywood, even today. So let's talk about those space truckers. The general plot of the first Alien movie is that this gigantic mining ship, the Nostromo, is crewed by just 7 working-class employees of a faceless, massive corporation that is only known as the Company. However, you can figure out the name of the company by looking at the props made by the art department, which designed a logo and imagined the corporation as a British-Japanese hybrid known as Weyland-Yutani. James Cameron would later explicitly refer to the company by this name, adding a D and calling it Weyland-Yutani, and it's become a core part of the franchise's world building. The first Alien movie takes place in 2122. The crew of the Nostromo mined 20 million tons of processing ore 60 light years from Earth and have been away from home for a few years. They use hibernation pods that slow their aging and make it easier to travel over long periods of time. However, the ship's computer, Mother, wakes them up early after receiving a nearby distress beacon. Now, the crew is obviously pissed after being woken up early and detoured while they're still 40 light years from Earth. But orders are orders, and the company really wants them to check out this distress beacon. They go to the moon LV-223 in the real-life Zeta Reticuli, where they find a giant alien ship. The ship has obviously been there a while because all that's left of the pilot is a skeleton. There are a few noteworthy things about this pilot, who is known in the fandom as the space jockey. For one thing, he's gigantic and clearly not human, although he's humanoid. For another, it looks like his chest has exploded from the inside. They also find a bunch of large, creepy alien eggs on the ship. Now, it's unclear if it's cargo or if the ship has been infested with these things. That's another interesting part about Alien. All of this is an intriguing backstory, but the film never really dwells on it. We never find out what the deal is with the space jockey or how the alien ship got there. All of this is a means to an end to get the Xenomorph on board the Nostromo. A facehugger, a spider-like crab creature, jumps out of one of the eggs and latches onto the helmet of Kane, played by the War Doctor himself, John Hurt. It uses acid to eat through his faceplate and wrap around Kane's face, putting him in a coma. The rest, of course, is history. The purpose of the facehugger is to implant an egg that gestates inside the chest of its host, which doesn't even need to be a human. Soon after, the host wakes up from their coma and a juvenile xenomorph bursts out of the chest of its host. That's apparently what happened to the space jockey, and that's what happened to John Hurt in this iconic scene.
Oh no, not again.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
Oh wait, not that one, not that one. That's Spaceballs. I mean this iconic scene.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Okay, no, for real this time.
Oh, God!
Just as this is when the Xenomorph is technically born, this is the moment the Alien franchise truly began. While we may take it for granted today, this scene shocked audiences with this suddenness and gory body horror. Even the cast didn't know just how gruesome the special effects would be. When Veronica Cartwright, who plays Lambert, is sprayed with blood, she wasn't expecting it, and her shock is real. The Xenomorph runs off, and the rest of the movie becomes a monster movie as the creature picks off the crew one by one. Now, we should note here that they never actually call it a Xenomorph. It really is just the alien. Like the name of Weyland-Yutani, the word Xenomorph isn't said out loud until the next movie.
A Xenomorph may be involved.
The name comes from the Greek words xeno and morph. Xeno means strange or foreign, as in xenophobia, while morph roughly means shape. So it's a perfect name to describe the inhuman, foreign look of the creature. Technically, a xenomorph refers to the alien at any time in its life cycle, whether it's the egg, the facehugger, or its mature form. The mature form, as we mentioned, takes on the properties of its host. Usually, we see a xenomorph burst out of a human, so usually we see it as a tall, vaguely human bipedal creature. In the first movie, the alien is played by 26-year-old Balaji Badeo, who is skinny and nearly 7 feet tall in a suit. H.R. Giger designed the look of the creature, which has an exoskeleton, iconic dome skull, and a second inner jaw that can slowly or quickly extend from its mouth and is strong enough to punch through bone. The xenomorph is extremely resistant and can't easily be killed. It's fast and it's brutal, and it has some level of intelligence, so it knows when to hide and when to attack. And of course, it has a great defense mechanism. Its blood is very strong acid, so you want to think twice before hurting it when it's right in front of you. So the crew, which doesn't have any real weapons on board, struggles to find and kill this creature, which takes them out one by one. Ripley, who was third in command, is soon the highest ranking officer on the ship. The movie doesn't really hint that she's the lead character until well into the film's runtime, and besides trying to keep the creature off the ship before they even know it's a threat, she doesn't really drive the story until after Captain Dallas is killed.
Dallas?
Take it easy. Dallas?
Another subplot of the film is that the company secretly wants to capture the creature alive so they can study it and probably use it as a weapon. The crew is fully expendable, which establishes that the company truly doesn't care for its employees or really have strong morals at all, a theme that will carry over into later films. Weyland-Yutani even has a mole aboard, Ash, played by Bilbo Baggins himself, Ian Holm. Ash eventually tries to stop the crew from killing the alien and nearly kills Ripley. When they stop Ash, they find out that he's not even human, but a synthetic android comprised of tubes and a white milky substance in lieu of blood. This reveal also sets up another core part of the Alien franchise, as nearly every Alien movie has some kind of similar synthetic android character, which parallels the inhuman and biomechanical design of the Xenomorph in many ways. Eventually, Ripley is the last woman standing, and having no other way to stop the alien, she programs the Nostromo to self-destruct. She escapes on a lifeboat with her pet cat, Jonesy, and it seems like the movie is over as it settles into a tranquil, peaceful ending. But of course, the Xenomorph has snuck aboard the lifeboat, and Ripley has to slowly and carefully put on a spacesuit before blowing it out of the airlock. So we see Sigourney Weaver in her underwear here as she dons the spacesuit.
Come on, Ripley, we've all seen your underwear! All right.
Now, I'm not bringing this up to be untoward, but because this is a very intentional choice by the filmmakers. Trigger warning for sexual assault here, because that's actually one of the main themes of the first Alien movie, and by extension, the xenomorph species itself. The very idea of how the alien species propagates and kills is rooted in these themes, including penetration and general violation of body autonomy. The alien propagates itself by forcibly inserting a phallic-like tube into the throat of its host and implanting an unwanted egg. The xenomorph then bursts out of its chest, a vicious act of reverse penetration. The way the alien can kill its victims can also involve the penetration of its inner jaw or sharpened tail. At one point, we see this tail slowly make its way up between the legs of Lambert before abducting her. It's not just a monster, it is a sexual predator. Ripley is shown at her most vulnerable when she is forced to confront the creature in her underwear. Sigourney Weaver has even said that when the alien is staring at her in this sequence, he is lusting after her. Now, obviously, this is all up for interpretation, and whether or not in-universe the alien was actually sexually interested in Ripley isn't as important as the fact that, thematically, it was. Other elements of the movie also play into these themes. Obviously, Giger's design of the creature evokes phallic imagery, not just in the jaw, but also in its round skull. Also, the design of the alien ship often resembles, simply put, a human vagina, which is explicitly stated by Ridley Scott. The original sin of the Nostromo crew is when they entered the alien ship uninvited through this vaginal-like opening. The idea of body autonomy and forced impregnation carries over into wider themes, such as motherhood itself, which is explored much more in the second film. However, it's present here too, as the HAL-like alien computer that controls the ship and has a higher authority over the crew is called Mother. Now, one more thing to note about the first Alien film before we move on is that the filmmakers didn't know they were building a franchise that would endure for decades. They were just trying to make a really good movie. One original ending for the film would have had the alien killing Ripley in the final confrontation, biting her head off, and then taking control of the lifeboat. It would then perfectly mimic Ripley's voice and send out a distress signal of its own, presumably to attract more victims.
Now, I'm pitching this to the studio, and I could feel the tension over the phone. The first executive arrived within 14 hours from Fox,
Make sure you didn't do it.
Threatening to fire me on the spot.
This alternate ending is important because it shows that the filmmakers didn't really have a concrete idea of what the alien was. Was it a mindless killing insect, or did it have a human-like intelligence where it could mimic others and pilot starships? Even to this day, the nature of exactly how the Xenomorphs operate, or where they come from, or just how intelligent they are is somewhat up to debate. However, we do learn a lot more about them in the expanded universe that came from this first influential film. The beginning of that expanded universe did a lot of the legwork, and it mostly came from one man, James Cameron.
I'm the king of the world!
The first Alien, released in 1979, was a huge success, and it made Sigourney Weaver a star and Ridley Scott a big-time director. And like we said earlier, it prematurely influenced the entire sci-fi genre as a whole. Obviously, Fox wanted to capitalize on this and make a sequel, but it took 7 years to do so due to some lawsuits over profits and the horror genre performing poorly at the box office in the early 1980s. James Cameron, who was fresh off the success of The Terminator, pitched his idea of a sequel and was hired to make it. There's a legendary story that's probably not true that his original pitch to studio executives was to write the word alien and then add an S at the end, and then draw a line through the S and make a dollar sign. What is true, however, is that Cameron wrote a huge treatment outlining his vision of the sequel titled Aliens, which really built out the universe. Aliens would end up being a totally different vibe than the original movie, and this was a good thing. Like other successful franchises, it proved that the IP was strong enough that it could transcend tones and genres and be used to tell different types of stories. Just as franchises like James Bond, Batman, and Star Wars can jump between different styles, the Alien series would do the same. One easy way to break down the 9 existing Alien films is to separate them into 3 distinct eras: the Ripley quadrilogy, the Predator crossovers, and the most recent prequel trilogy. The Ripley quadrilogy especially is interesting in that each film, which stars Sigourney Weaver fighting a xenomorph or 2 or several hundred xenomorphs, has a different director and a totally distinct vibe from each other. While Ridley Scott started off the series with the slow-burning, elevating horror, James Cameron very much made Aliens a James Cameron movie, complete with the Bill Paxton role and everything. After its first act, it becomes non-stop action. It's filled with quippy, macho characters who drop one-liners as much as they drop explosive grenades.
Hey, Vasquez. Have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
It uses inventive miniatures and other special effects to really blow audiences away with its scale and craftsmanship. Whether it's with motion capture, state-of-the-art CGI, or practical effects, James Cameron is always creating shots that make you wonder, how the hell did he do that? And Aliens is no exception. But it's not just an action movie. It has plenty of the body horror and sci-fi elements of the first film. It's also very specifically a war action movie. Everything from the cinematography to the characters to the production design and the march-like musical score tells you that this is a war movie about space marines versus an army of aliens. The very concept of space marines, which has been used by plenty of other movies and franchises since, gets most of its inspiration from what Cameron develops here: working class men and women who see space as just another setting to shoot their slightly advanced machine guns.
I only need to know one thing: where they are.
Everything from Halo to Warhammer 40k can draw a direct line to Apone, Hicks, Vasquez, and the other space marines that we meet in Aliens. The film takes place nearly 60 years after the first film. Ripley has been adrift in a lifeboat in Cairo sleep all this time when a salvage ship stumbles across her and brings her back home to Earth. She has PTSD and just wants to move on with her life, especially since the world that she knew has moved on without her. However, she finds out from Paul Reiser that Weyland-Yutani, the company, has set up a human colony on the same planet that she and the Nostromo crew originally found the alien eggs. And that colony has mysteriously gone quiet. Ripley joins Paul Reiser and a crew of Colonial Space Marines to investigate. Ripley is very hesitant, but this time, since she'll have trained soldiers with heavy firepower, what could go wrong? Of course, everything goes wrong.
Who'd have guessed?
When they get there, they find that the entire colony has been killed and infested with hundreds of xenomorphs, which quickly take out most of the Marines. Even with their big guns and tanks, they are outnumbered by the aliens, which much more resemble a hive of insects in this film. They even have a queen, one of the most notable contributions to the franchise by Cameron. It adds an important component to the life cycle of the xenomorphs. The eggs are all laid by one queen who is larger and smarter than the other creatures. Like a queen bee, the queen mostly stays in the nest while the drone aliens bring her food and host for her eggs. The aliens use resin to harden and build this nest, and this resin was seen somewhat in the first movie, especially in deleted scenes where Ripley discovers that some of the crew are still alive alive, cocoons so they could presumably be eaten or impregnated by future facehuggers. The Queen doesn't just one-up the threat of the Xenomorphs by providing Ripley with a bigger, tougher opponent, although it certainly does that. It's actually emblematic of the key theme of the story that James Cameron wanted to tell with Aliens, motherhood. Remember that the first film had themes of sexual assault and bodily autonomy, which didn't fully go away here since, well, you can't really show the alien life cycle without it. But the main theme of this particular Alien film is motherhood, personified by Ripley's relationship with the only survivor of the human colony, a little girl named Newt. Newt has been surviving for months by hiding in crawl spaces and is practically in a feral state when the Marines first find her. Only Ripley connects to her at first by showing motherhood instincts and tenderness, which is also interesting because it's a side of the character that we didn't really see in the first movie. Now, this works fine in the theatrical version of the movie. Cameron takes his time setting up Newt and Ripley's relationship and the stakes of the characters before the action really kicks in the second act. But it's especially more poignant in the director's cut of Aliens, which added 20 minutes of deleted scenes, including more time setting up Newt's family in the human colony before the aliens invaded. A lot of people prefer this extended edition since it includes more backstory and world building, although from a pacing point of view, it's probably best that we got the theatrical version the way we did. However, one key scene that is cut out truly does inform the rest of Ripley's motivations throughout the rest of the film. Remember, Ripley has been in cryosleep for 57 years. Before that, she was away from Earth on the Nostromo for a few years more. Everyone she knows is dead and buried, and in an early scene, we find out that she actually had a daughter, Amanda, who she last saw when she was a young child and who she promised she'd come home to as soon as she could.
Real sorry.
When she asks about her daughter, Ripley is shown a photo of an old woman and told that she already died. Ripley is heartbroken, which furthers her alienation from life on Earth and drives her to head back to LV-223. When she finds Newt, a young girl that was roughly Amanda's age the last time Ripley saw her, she immediately connects with her, and Newt becomes a surrogate daughter. In the director's cut, she is literally replacing Ripley's dead daughter. With or without this backstory, the themes of motherhood and family remain the same in Aliens. Rounding out the family unit, according to Cameron, is Corporal Dwayne Hicks, played by Terminator's Michael Behan. Hicks is one of the Space Marines, and there's a shot that Cameron specifically points to after Hicks rescued Ripley and Newt from a facehugger that specifically shows those three as a family. By embracing Newt and motherhood, Ripley is directly counteracting the forced impregnation of the Xenomorph by choosing of her own volition to be a mother. This brings us back to the Queen, and one of the strongest tropes in genre filmmaking, the evil counterpart villain that holds a dark mirror to the protagonist.
You know how you can tell who the arch villain's going to be? He's the exact opposite of the hero.
Flash has Reverse Flash. Bruce Willis's Overseer has Sam Jackson's Mr. Glass. Darkwing Duck has Negaduck, and Ellen Ripley has the Alien Queen. The Alien Queen forces her children down the throat of unwilling victims, whereas Ripley takes on children she's not even related to out of love and compassion. They represent two sides of the franchise, the human versus the alien. Now this is all very deliberate, which is why the climax of Aliens is an epic showdown between the two. Newt is kidnapped as the survivors are trying to get off world before terraforming equipment goes nuclear and wipes out the colony. Ripley goes back for Newt armed with a flamethrower in a sequence that evokes Ripley making her way through the Nostromo during the self-destruct countdown. She holds the Queen's eggs hostage to retrieve Newt and escape before vindictively burning the eggs anyway. Enraged, the Queen breaks free of her nest and stows away on the Marine ship, just as the original Xenomorph stowed away on the lifeboat in the first film.
You know, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Ripley has to fight the Queen, mano a mano, mother versus mother, using a power loader meant for cargo that is set up earlier in the film.
R.I.P. Anton Chekhov. You would have loved the power loader.
He totally would have. Ripley faces off with the Queen in the power loader and delivers one of the greatest badass action one-liners Hollywood has ever produced.
Put the bunny back in the box.
No, that's Con Air. I'm talking about this line.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Doesn't get any more iconic than that. Now we should note here that Sigourney Weaver actually got an Oscar nomination for this movie, which is super rare for a sci-fi action film. After the badass entrance, Ripley fights the Queen. Then Ripley does what she does best and blows the alien out the airlock.
Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
Ripley and Newt are reunited. She is a mother again, and with the death of the Queen, she can finally move on from her PTSD from the first film. She even comes full circle by trusting the android Bishop, played by another James Cameron alum, Lance Hendrickson. Despite being assured that he was a newer, more advanced android than Ash and was programmed never to harm humans, Ripley kept him at arm's length throughout the entire movie, still traumatized by her experiences with Ash. She even assumes that Bishop left her for dead when she can't find the dropship.
Bishop! God damn you!
Bishop does come back for her though, and saves Newt at the end despite being literally ripped in half by the Queen. He earns Ripley's trust, and Ripley's story and the movie ends on a positive, hopeful note. There was one problem though.
The movie made a lot of money?
The movie made a lot of money, and Hollywood can't leave well enough alone, so they chose to continue Ripley's story with another sequel. That sequel came out 6 years later in 1992 with Alien 3, back to the singular title because this movie, like the first, would only feature one primary xenomorph. Alien 3 was the first feature film by music video director David Fincher, who brought his moody, stylized aesthetic that he would become famous for with later films such as Seven, Fight Club, and the darkest of them all, Mank.
Court Chester.
Fincher has infamously disowned the movie, which has deeply divided the Alien fandom. Simply put, many people just flat out hate it for a variety of reasons that we'll get to soon. But perhaps not so coincidentally, Alien 3 really struggled in development hell before it was finally made, with several completely different stories pitched and written before we got what we got. In fact, this space between Aliens and Alien 3 represents a kind of nexus point in the Alien franchise, where multiple different timelines branch off and we have different published versions of what happened post-Aliens. This is kind of similar to another James Cameron work, Terminator, which through different reboots and other media has different canon timelines for the events that happened after the events of Terminator 2. An early draft of Alien 3 was written shortly after the success of Aliens with a story by Walter Hill and 2 other producers on the franchise. The idea was to make Corporal Hicks the main character, with Ripley reduced to a cameo role. However, they would shoot 2 sequels back to back, with Ripley coming back in the 4th and most epic entry. The producers hired author William Gibson to write the screenplay. Now, Gibson was at the peak of his fame after almost single-handedly inventing the entire cyberpunk genre with his novel Neuromancer.
Hugo Award winner William Gibson.
So hot right now.
Like Aliens, this Alien 3, called Aliens 3 with Roman numerals instead of an exponent, was heavy on the action and took place in a space station that was basically a giant capitalist space mall. Think The Sprawl in Dead Space 2, another franchise that takes heavy inspiration from the Alien series. Hicks finds out that the company, Weyland-Yutani, is experimenting on the aliens to create an army. He's forced to team up with another space government that the corporate capitalist Earth government is at war with, the Union of Progressive Peoples, which Gibson describes as space commies. Rather than the themes of motherhood and sexual autonomy, this movie would focus more on the military-industrial complex and socioeconomics, which makes sense since it was conceived at the end of the Cold War. Another interesting idea that was a product of its time was the alien DNA symbolizing HIV/AIDS. This version of Alien 3 never got made, though you could read the unproduced screenplay as well as novelizations and audio adaptations of it that are still available. Another script that never got made was about Ripley landing on a planet that was just a single monastery of monks who rejected modern technology. Basically, everything was made out of wood and they didn't have any weapons to fight the alien. This eventually morphed into a prison planet idea by writer David Twohy, who would go on to create Pitch Black and the Riddick franchise with Vin Diesel. The Alien 3 we did get, which by that time it had been through like 10 different writers, combined elements from all of these, including Gibson's idea of barcode tattoos. The setting was a prison planet, but the prisoners followed a born-again-like religion, similar to the monks in the unproduced draft. They all had XX chromosomes, which meant that they were genetically filled with toxic masculinity and were all violent rapists and killers. When Ripley's ship crash lands, she is the only woman on the planet, meaning the prisoners are just as much of a threat as the alien. One of the reasons people dislike this movie so much is they can't tell the characters apart. The prison planet is filled with lice, so everybody shaves their head and are bald. Most of the actors are British, so they all talk the same, which, when combined with their bald heads, makes them hard to tell apart. However, this meant that Ripley had to shave her head, giving us an iconic badass look from Sigourney Weaver that made this version of Ripley tougher than ever. Another reason, mainly the main reason that fans are so divided on this film, is that at the very beginning, Hicks and Newt are killed off.
What?
When their ship from the end of the last movie crashes, they are killed in the crash. There's even a gruesome autopsy scene where we see their bodies literally taken apart. Remember, this is Seven director David Fincher behind the camera. Bishop is also really messed up from both the Queen's attack and the crash, and he asks Ripley to put him out of his misery, which she does. Eventually, Ripley finds out that before the crash, a facehugger implanted her with a chest burster, and that it wasn't just any old xenomorph, it was another queen, one that could bring the entire alien species back. Ripley kills herself at the end of the movie before Weyland-Yutani could get their hands on the alien DNA, meaning that everyone who survived Aliens dies, meaning that James Cameron's happy ending of Aliens is completely erased and leaving the franchise in a very dark, depressing place. Sigourney Weaver was fine with all of this, or she wouldn't have done the movie. She was kind of done playing Ripley and thought this was a great way to put a period at the end of the sentence. At least until they pulled out a truckload of money to her house to make just one more. However, before we get into that one, let's talk a little bit more about Alien 3. Sure, everyone looks the same and it's dark as hell, but there is a lot to love about it too. Notably, the Xenomorph that terrorizes the prison planet doesn't come from a human host, but instead an animal. There are actually two different versions of Alien 3 because it was heavily edited and reshot in an attempt to make the story clearer. So not only are fans divided over whether or not Alien 3 is good or not, they're even divided over which of these versions is better. In one version, the Xenomorph comes out of an ox, while in the theatrical version, it comes out of a pet dog. Either way, the result is the same. A more animalistic version of the Xenomorph than we've ever seen before. One that runs on all fours and is leaner and meaner. One cool thing about the Xenomorph taking on the properties of its host is that it makes it easy for toy companies like Kenner to churn out a bunch of variant alien action figures, like the bull alien, the snake alien, the praying mantis alien.
That's business.
These toys would even come with little comic strips that gave some backstory to these animal-based Xenomorphs. Alien 3 also gives us another version of Bishop played by Lance Hendrickson, in addition to his messed up aliens android. This one represents Weyland-Yutani and tries to trick Ripley into thinking that they want to help, when really he just wants the queen that's inside of her. He says that he is the human designer of the Bishop android, like how in Star Trek Data looks just like his human creator, Dr. Soong. He's attacked and you see him bleed red blood, but the makeup effects make it look as if his ear is hanging off in a weird way. Now because of this, fans have been forever divided over whether or not this Bishop really was who he said he was, or a more advanced android that the company was using to deceive Ripley. Now this is important because it leads to Bishop's ancestral line playing an even bigger role in subsequent sequels. Two underlying themes in Alien 3 are religion and redemption. Many of the prisoners have used religion and the hard labor on the brutal prison planet to save their souls. They call the alien terms like beast and dragon, evoking imagery from the Book of Revelation and other apocalyptic religious works. The planet and its giant furnace literally look like hell, and Ripley dies by purging herself of the queen by jumping into fire. I mean, she is dead. There's no coming back from that, right?
Well, yeah, but did the movie make a lot of money?
Yeah, the movie made a lot of money. So Sigourney Weaver got a huge salary to come back one more time for 1997's Alien Resurrection, which the studio was keen to make since the last film was so poorly received. It's called Resurrection because Ripley is literally brought back from the dead, although not really. The film takes place in 2381, or 200 years in the future after Alien 3.
Hey, I thought you were dead. Yeah, I get that a lot.
And it takes place on a military ship where scientists are using blood found on the prison planet to clone the alien to, once again, use it as a weapon. They do mention, however, that they have nothing to do with Weyland-Yutani, which finally fizzled out at some point.
Did it merge with Warner Brothers Discovery?
Probably. The scientists had trouble cloning the DNA because it was a mix of both Ripley's and the Queen's Xenomorph that was inside of her. So clone Ripley is mostly Ripley, but she's also part Xenomorph. This means that she ages rapidly, quickly becoming middle-aged. It also means that she has slightly acidic blood, enhanced strength and agility, and black fingernails for some reason. Conveniently, the Xenomorphs use some kind of biological memory, so clone Ripley also regains the memories of the original Ripley. She learns that she is the 8th clone made by the scientists. The first 7 attempts formed these abomination hybrids of the two, which Ripley is horrified to discover and puts out of her misery in a scene that South Park did an amazing parody of with Tally.
Kill me. Kill me. Oh my God, no!
She also learns that, in addition to a slightly alien-fied version of Ripley, the scientists were also able to make a slightly human version of the clone of the Queen. This Queen gave birth to 12 Xenomorphs who, of course, escape. The resulting story is kind of a mix of the first 2 Alien movies. Like the first movie, it takes place on a spaceship and is about trying to survive. Like the second, it has many aliens and plenty of action. Alien Resurrection really is its own thing, though, different enough from the other 3 movies in the series up to this point. The script was written by a young Joss Whedon, who imbued it with his signature style of colorful ensemble characters and wisecracking jokes. Danny Boyle and Brian Singer were considered as directors, but the studio eventually went with French filmmaker Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who would go on to make Amélie. Jeunet already established himself with a unique visual style and darkly comic sensibility seen in his films The Delicatessen and The City of Lost Children. With Jeunet came some of his go-to actors, including Dominique Piccone and Ron Perlman. They were part of a crew of mercenaries that Ripley teams up with to escape the doomed spaceship, which is on a crash course for Earth. One of the crew is Winona Ryder, who plays yet another android named Call. Once again, the themes of sex and motherhood are explored with Alien Resurrection, but differently than before. Sigourney Weaver has said multiple times that she thought the natural conclusion to her character arc would be that Ripley would have sex with the alien.
Her?
With the cloning and hybridization, this sort of happens here. She also has a weird relationship with Winona Ryder's character that is part motherly and part sexual tension-y. Since the alien queen has part of Ripley's human DNA, it evolves and does a franchise first. It gives birth to a new alien like a mammal would, rather than by laying an egg. Ripley is even embraced by the Xenomorphs to witness the birth, in a trippy scene that is honestly, and hopefully, the closest we ever come to a sex scene between Sigourney Weaver and a Xenomorph. The alien-human hybrid queen's live birth results in a hybrid known as the Newborn, which is even more human than other Xenomorphs. It's skeletal-collared and has a skull for a face, resembling early designs by H.R. Geiger. It also has expressive, human eyes. It also sees Ripley as its true mother and brutally decapitates the alien queen shortly after being born. Once again, like poetry, we get a climax that resembles the first two films, with the survivors escaping the doomed mothership and the newborn secretly stowing away. Ripley does have a maternal connection and affection for this creature and embraces it, but she remains loyal to Call and her new human friends in the end. Using her acidic blood, she burns a hole in the ship's window, which sucks the newborn out into space, just as previous Xenomorphs were blown out of the airlock in Alien and Aliens. This version is way gorier and harder to watch though, as the newborn is sucked from the inside out. It's also screaming human baby-like wails as Ripley is forced to watch her own child die a violent death at her own hand. While Joss Whedon's script makes this more or less a fun action-adventure movie, this is some truly bleak stuff. However, it ends on a hopeful note as the ship makes it to Earth. This is the first time, after more than 260 years, that Ripley is finally back home. Remember, in Aliens, she is brought to a station orbiting Earth rather than all the way back. Ron Perlman says that Earth is a shithole at this point in the future, which, given climate change and the threat of nuclear war, isn't really far-fetched, but it's still Earth. Originally, Whedon's script had an entire climax take place on Earth, which would have been a big deal. Up until now, all the Alien films took place on spaceships or industrial space colonies, which all roughly looked the same. However, it wouldn't be until the next film in the franchise that we finally saw the Xenomorphs on planet Earth, Alien vs. Predator. Alien Resurrection was the last time we'd see Sigourney Weaver or Ripley on film in the Alien franchise. There had been occasional rumors that she would come back, possibly with James Cameron or District 9 director Neil Blomkamp, but these projects never happened, and at this point most likely won't, as Sigourney Weaver is 75 years old.
Or then again, 90-year-old Ellen Burstyn came back for an Exorcist sequel 50 years after the first one.
Very true, so never say never. But the next two films we got in the franchise were crossovers with the Predator franchise, which began in 1987 with an Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie. Originally, Predator had nothing to do with Alien, except they were both made by 20th Century Fox and both used legendary special effects artist Stan Winston. Winston is behind the designs and effects for, among many other movies, The Terminator, The Thing, Batman Returns, and Jurassic Park. He worked with James Cameron on Aliens, helping to design the first Queen and winning an Oscar for his efforts. He also designed the Predator in the first movie. Predator 2 ends with Danny Glover fighting the Predator on his spaceship, where the Predator keeps trophies of his past victories, including an old French flintlock that we only recently found out is from the events of the movie Prey. As an homage to Stan Winston, the production team put a Xenomorph skull in the background as a subtle nod to the franchise. Now that little Easter egg accidentally spawned the entire crossover Alien vs. Predator franchise. Once fans noticed the alien skull, they demanded the two iconic species duke it out on screen. Side note, according to Ridley Scott, Alien takes place in the same cinematic universe as his film Blade Runner, so theoretically we could see a Predator also face off against Rick Deckard or Ryan Gosling's character. The Alien vs. Predator franchise was explored through video games, novels, and comics, most notably made by Dark Horse. It wouldn't be until 14 years after Predator 2 that we'd finally see them fight on the big screen with the iconic tagline, "Whoever wins, we lose." Alien vs. Predator was directed by horror action filmmaker Paul W.S. Anderson.
Oh yeah, the guy who made the Royal Tenenbaums and Grand Budapest Hotel? That seems like an odd choice.
No, that's Wes Anderson.
Oh, so you're talking about the guy who made Boogie Nights and Licorice Pizza. That seems like an odd choice.
No, that's Paul Thomas Anderson. Paul W.S. Anderson directed Event Horizon and Resident Evil before helming the Alien vs. Predator film. Like those other films, it was kind of a dumbed-down action movie with horror elements, which makes sense considering its IPs. Now, while it does take place on Earth, it's not really the aliens on Earth that fans were hoping for. For one thing, it takes place in the present day rather than the future. For another, it takes place in an ancient alien pyramid in Antarctica. And this setting looks cold and foreign, just like the settings of the previous 4 films, so it might as well not be on Earth. The premise is that the Predators actually hatch Xenomorphs to train their juvenile hunters in the art of predatoring. Human scientists who discover the temple get caught in the crossfire. As an homage to Ripley, this film also has a strong female lead, played by Sanaa Lathan. Lance Hendrickson also returns as billionaire Charles Bishop Wayland. This implies that it's his company in the future that kicks off the events of the series, and that Bishop is named and designed as an homage to him, which would be like if the company Facebook becomes in 200 years sells robots to the military that look like Mark Zuckerberg. Another nice homage is that when the Queen is dispatched at the end, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean in a scene that looks very similar to the aliens in the first 2 films being blown out of the airlock.
Wait, does that mean there's a queen alien living at the bottom of the ocean? Like Jason at the end of Friday the 13th Part 6?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the most notable thing about Alien vs. Predator, besides the fact that it introduces the Predators, is that it's the only PG-13 film in the Alien franchise. This means the violence and gore are toned down, which kind of fits, because this film and its sequel feel more immature than the other films in the series. They're not as elevated or thematically rich, and are more about the thrills and chills as a popcorn pleaser than other Alien movies, even more so than Alien Resurrection. Its sequel, Alien vs. Predator Requiem, is R-rated, although it's only more mature in the sense that it definitely got a lot gorier than the first film. It came out 3 years after AvP in 2007 and is directed by Greg and Colin Strauss.
The Austrian composer of the Australian operetta Die Fledermaus?
No, sorry to get your hopes up. That's Johann Strauss. The brother Strauss are special effects artists who directed mid-budget movies like Skyline and, well, this one. Like with Skyline, they used mostly cable TV actors to save money on casting.
You've always known how to pick them, Jess.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm getting ready to fire it.
And they were more focused on delivering cool special effects than interesting characters or a coherent story. To their credit, the special effects do look pretty solid when you can see them. The cinematography is notoriously dark. You're not going to see anything in this movie unless you turned out your lights.
Hey, Dad, I can't see real good. Is that Bill Shakespeare over there?
Requiem is also dark in the sense that, well, it's really bleak. At one point, an entire maternity ward of pregnant women are killed. But there are some redeeming qualities to the film. For one thing, it finally introduced the Predalien. Remember that Xenomorphs take on the properties of their host. At the end of the first AvP, a chestburster escapes from the main predator, Scar, and is the first on-screen Predalien we've seen. Instead of an inner jaw, it has the mandibles of a predator. In Requiem, we see the mature version of this Predalien, which is stronger than typical Xenomorph. It also propagates in a different way, laying eggs into pregnant humans and creating more traditional Xenomorphs. These aliens take over a small mountain town in Colorado. Even more so than in Predalien, this might be the most interesting thing about the film. It's really the only time we see the aliens on Earth scenario fans have always dreamed of, even if it's not on the Earth of Ripley's future. It also makes the film distinct from all the others. The idea of a town besieged by monsters is a fun subgenre, and using Xenomorphs as the monsters makes it even cooler. Adding to the threat is a predator who is trying to eliminate the Predalien and its spawn, which is why this film can accurately be called Aliens vs. Predator. Eventually, the military nukes the entire town to eliminate the threat, like at the end of Return of the Dead and The Crazies. The survivors barely make it out in time and meet another billionaire CEO. This time, it's not Lance Hendrick's Wayland, but a Japanese woman named Ms. Yutani. She gets access to the Predator's alien gun and presumably eventually merges her company with Wayland's and pursues alien weaponry far into the future. While Requiem does expand the lore and universe of the Aliens franchise and gives fans things they've demanded for years, such as the Predalien, it was poorly received for being a pretty so-so movie with dumbed-down action schlock. Fox, though, was eager to bring some of the prestige back to the franchise, and as the legacy sequel revolution was well underway, they decided to bring back the original Alien director himself, Ridley Scott. They also wanted James Cameron to work with Scott, but Cameron, who didn't love that they killed off his original characters in Alien 3, thought the validity of the franchise was dead in the water after its Predator crossovers. The idea for the new film would be to explore another aspect of the alien lore that hadn't been touched on by the movies, the dead space jockey from the original film. After all, it was his ship full of alien eggs that kicked off the whole series. So what was his deal? Screenwriter John Spates felt that the idea of a giant alien would be hard to get invested in, so he looked to tie it into larger themes like the origin of life itself. Eventually, Lost and Leftovers writer Damon Lindelof was brought in to revise the script, and he sought to distance the film from the Alien franchise altogether. His reasoning reasoning was that if the prequel just ended with the beginning of the first Alien film, it wouldn't be very interesting. He changed so much of the story, in fact, that it barely resembled an Alien movie and was almost considered to be pitched as a brand new franchise. The studio eventually decided to land somewhere in the middle. The movie took Alien out of its name and was just titled Prometheus. It didn't exactly follow, or rather precede, the events of the first film, with the alien eggs being replaced by mysterious canisters and the space jockey's chest bursting somewhere besides the cockpit of the ship where it was originally found in the first film. But it still directly ties to the events of the original movies, enough that you can consider it canon. There's a new billionaire named Weyland, this time Peter Weyland, played by Guy Pearce in old man makeup. He has designed a lifeline android with milky white blood named David, played by Michael Fassbender. Prometheus takes place in 2093, so Peter could be the son or grandson of Lance Hendricks' AvP character, Charles Bishop Weyland. Guy Pearce's Weyland funds a space voyage on a ship called the Prometheus with a team of scientists led by 2 archaeologists that have discovered an ancient star map. This star map implies that ancient humans knew of an alien civilization that had visited Earth before, tying into the ancient aliens theory that life on Earth was seeded by an advanced civilization billions of years ago. In the Alien universe, this theory is true, and life on Earth was spawned by a race of giants called the Engineers. The Engineers also created a life form that is more or less the Xenomorph, which they use to eliminate life on planets that they deem as experimental failures. They were on their way to Earth to wipe us out with these creatures when the ship crashed on LV-223. Like Alien, Prometheus introduces disgusting monsters, gruesome body horror, and violent deaths. It definitely feels like an Alien movie, even if none of the iconography is exactly what we've seen before. Eventually, the protagonist, Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, played by Noomi Rapace, uses a surgical pod to forcibly remove a xenomorph squid, called the trilobite, before it has a chance to burst out of her chest. Prometheus also does its job as a prequel by showing a xenomorph burst out of an engineer's chest and setting off a distress signal for Ripley's crew to find several decades later. But where it really fits in with the franchise, and especially the first film, is its exploration of deeper themes. Rather than motherhood and sexual undercurrents, however, this time the movie is even more existentially philosophical. It's concerned with creation itself and the human desire to know where we came from and why we are here. The characters go on this dangerous mission far out into space to find out who made us and ask the Engineers why. They're disappointed to find out the Engineers don't see us as special at all, and in fact wanted to get rid of us. Just as the ancient Greek titan Prometheus was punished by the gods for giving humans access to fire, the Engineers were punished by the Xenomorphs for creating humans and then having the hubris to also kill them. Another interpretation is that humans are punished for overreaching with scientific exploration without considering the consequences. You know, like the American Prometheus, aka J. Robert Oppenheimer. Weyland isn't just interested in the origin of life after all, he's interested in immortality. He's very old and knows that he'll be dead soon, and he's hoping the Engineers will give him a way to extend that life, possibly forever. That's exactly why he created David, an android that doesn't age or die, that he considers more of his own son than his actual child, played by Charlize Theron. David is just as important to the themes of Prometheus and isn't meant to be just a callback to Bishop or Call. He is sentient life created by man, just as man is sentient life created by the Engineers. Just as humankind seeks to transcend their purpose, so too does David seek to transcend being an android. Just as humans are ultimately a disappointment to our creators, the Engineers, David is resentful that Weyland sees him as a disappointment. In fact, this kind of turns David bad, as we will see in the next film in the series, Alien Covenant. Alien Covenant came out in 2017 and is a direct sequel to Prometheus, and Ridley Scott returns as director. However, it's also kind of a reboot in that audiences weren't too crazy about how far Prometheus strayed from the alien mythology, and Covenant was meant to right that mistake. To that end, they put the word alien back in the title and made it more of a traditional alien film, with a strong female protagonist from a spaceship facing off against a traditional xenomorph. The film also serves to bridge the prequel mythology Lindelof and Spates created with the timeline of the Sigourney Weaver tetralogy. A crew of a colony ship called the Covenant finds yet another distress signal, but on a new planet this time. There, they discover a bunch of dead Engineers, and it's implied that this is the Engineers' home planet. At the end of Prometheus, David and Shaw, the only survivors, choose to find this planet and meet their creators rather than go back home to Earth. The crew finds David, who is living alone on the planet. It turns out that he's been experimenting with the xenomorph technology the Engineers use to wipe out planets, trying to perfect it. Just as Weyland created new life with David, David wished to create new life himself, bringing everything full circle. He's the one that designed all the Engineers. He also killed Dr. Shaw in a brutal off-screen death that evokes Newton Hicks being killed off between Aliens and Alien 3. David's experiments eventually create the alien eggs, facehuggers, and traditional xenomorphs that we know from the Ripley movies. Alien Covenant ends with a cliffhanger. David has secretly replaced Walter, the benevolent android crew member of the Covenant that looked just like him. With the survivors back in cryostasis, he now has access to the entire colony ship filled with thousands of human colonists and frozen embers. embryos. He can continue his experimentation and create an entire army of xenomorphs. It's yet another hopeless, bleak ending that the franchise seems to love. Ridley Scott fully intended to make a third film in the David trilogy that would bridge the Prometheus storyline with the beginning of the first Alien movie. But it doesn't look like we will ever get it, as the next film in the series, Alien Romulus, is totally unrelated. Neither Prometheus nor Covenant bombed at the box office, although they weren't mega hits either. Notably, Disney took over Fox between these movies, which is why Alien Romulus is its own thing entirely. It's about Kieran Culkin's character in succession.
More, Romulus. More. I need you.
Just kidding, but I would totally watch that. The 2024 film is written and directed by Fede Alvarez, who made Don't Breathe and the Evil Dead remake. Now, at the time we've made this video, this movie's not out yet, but it looks a lot closer to the original movies as it's set on a derelict space station infested by traditional xenomorphs. Alien Romulus takes place between the first two Alien movies, Alien and Alien, so it's unclear how it will end for the characters. It doesn't bode well for them though, since the Space Marines and Aliens certainly don't seem to know that much about xenomorphs until Ripley comes along. Another upcoming Alien project we don't know much about is the Alien television series being written by Noah Hawley. The FX and Hulu show is executive produced by Ridley Scott and it's called Alien Earth. Now, since it's a prequel that takes place 30 years before the 1979 film, there is a chance that it could finish the David storyline that Scott never got to complete on the big screen. However, Hawley has said that it is inspired more by the original film than Prometheus and Covenant. Now, considering Hawley is the same guy who made the Fargo TV show and the X-Men series Legion, we can expect it to draw both heavily from its source material while also being pretty far out there. Given the title, we may finally get a cinematic look at the Earth of, well, more or less, Ripley's time period. With Ridley Scott producing, maybe we'll also get Easter eggs, it being part of the same universe as Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. Now, if that's not enough Alien content for you, there is a huge expanded universe beyond the movies and upcoming TV show. Like other expanded universes, what's considered canon, like canon, or not canon at all is kind of up for debate within the fandom. One short film that is pretty much canon is TED 2023, written by Damon Lindelof as a tie-in to Prometheus. It's literally a TED Talk given by Guy Pearce as young Peter Wayland, setting up the events of the film. Another tie-in film was made about Dr. Shaw, starring Noomi Rapace. There are also countless video games set in the Alien universe, from arcade shooters to 8-bit platformers to more modern AAA blockbusters. The latter, specifically, are more cinematic than the older games, and explore and deepen the universe. Some are even widely considered canon, such as Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation is a survival horror from 2014 where you play in first person as Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's adult daughter who lived and died an entire life while she was in Cairo sleep with Jonesy. One advantage to using Amanda is that the character looks like Sigourney Weaver, further tying it to the movies. The game takes place on a space station infested by a lone xenomorph. Since it's in first person and the alien can't easily be dispatched by another BFG 9000 or other weapon, it's an extremely scary game that involves a lot of running, hiding, and stealth. Alien Isolation also serves as a launching point for its own spin-off comics, novels, and web series. These include the comics Aliens Resistance and Aliens Rescue and the novel Alien Prototype. Other notable video games include the 2021 shooter Aliens Firearm Elite, which is a co-op survival game like Left 4 Dead and Back 4 Blood. It serves as a direct sequel to the first 3 Alien films and deals with Weyland-Yutani, engineers, AI, and Colonial Marines. Another Colonial Marine game is called, you guessed it, Alien Colonial Marines. This game is from 2013 and was made by Sega, although it came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3. And we can't not talk about Alien Colonial Marines because in many ways it serves as the true Alien 3 and redeems the sins of the David Fincher film. It's an alternate sequel to Aliens that keeps the same vibe while also constructing its story in a way that doesn't contradict any canon with the later films. Lance Hendrickson and Michael Behan both returned to voice video game characters with their likenesses. Behan is back as Hicks, who we learned was kidnapped from his cryopod and replaced with some other poor bastard who ends up dying in the crash in Alien 3. Hendrickson plays Michael Wayland, the bishop we see in Alien 3, who is confirmed in this game to be an android. He is eventually executed by Hicks after the events of Alien 3. In addition to the unproduced Alien 3 screenplay and the adaptation of William Gibson's Alien 3 and this Alien 2.5 Colonial Marines game, there is another alt Alien 3 out there, the novel Out of the Shadows. Like Colonial Marines, it's written in such a way that it technically doesn't even break canon, even though it stars Ripley and takes place between Alien and Aliens. Ripley is found by a mining crew and woken up from Cairo sleep and is forced to fight aliens once again. She also has to deal with Ash, the evil android from the first movie, who uploaded his consciousness into Ripley's lifeboat. At the end of the story, Ripley has her mind wiped and is placed back into the Chiropod to be discovered discovered yet again at the start of Aliens.
Then everything is wrapped up in a neat little package.
The book is also available as a fully produced audiobook with Blade Runner star Rutger Hauer providing the voice of Ash. It spawned 2 sequels of its own, Alien Sea of Sorrows and Alien River of Pain. Sea of Sorrows takes place decades after Alien Resurrection and features the return of Weyland-Yutani. Its protagonist is Alan Decker, a descendant of Ripley and her daughter Amanda. Sea of Sorrows is a standalone story that takes place on Hadley's Hope, Newt's colony, and depicts its fall before the events of Aliens. There's also a 2022 novel set in the Prometheus Alien Covenant timeline, taking place around the same time as Alien 3. It involves engineers and xenomorphs that are closer to the Deacon creature that burst out of the Engineer at the end of Prometheus than the more traditional ones. Notably, this story also includes the Union of Progressive Peoples, the space commies that William Gibson created for his unproduced Alien 3 story. Another notable Aliens novel is Original Sin, which is a direct sequel to Alien Resurrection. Published in 2005, it continues the story of Ripley 8, the clone played by Sigourney Weaver in the movie. It's the furthest out in the timeline we ever see movie Ripley. She's now captain of the mercenary ship Betty, which still has Call, Genre, and Vries, the sole survivors of Alien Resurrection, as its crew. They fight more xenomorphs at a botanical space station that's based on a deleted scene from the movie. The crew discover that a shadowy government agency known as Loki have been working with the alien species the Malakok for centuries. This species is the same as the space jockey from the first film or the engineers we meet in Prometheus, which hadn't been written yet. This shows a distinct break from canon with those movies and illustrates just how vast and complicated the Alien expanded universe is. Just like with Star Wars, not only do new movies contradict with older canon, creating branching and alternate timelines like the Legends works, but sometimes they just contradict one another even within the same canon. With so many different writers and publishers involved, it's inevitable that this will happen sometimes. In addition to the video games and novels I mentioned, there are many, many more that I have not. There's also a ton of comics, including crossovers with Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, and even Judge Dredd.
You ready?
Well, that's great. That's just great, man.
You don't look ready.
The most famous comics are probably those from Dark Horse, which started publishing them in 1988 as a direct continuation of the Alien storyline. This makes the Dark Horse comic yet another alt-Alien 3 and branching timeline. Many of these comics were adapted in the novels throughout the 1990s, and they follow Ripley, Hicks, and Newt. After Alien 3 killed off Hicks and Newt, Dark Horse kept the characters they had been writing about for years and just changed their names to Billy and Wilkes. This timeline also crossed over with Predator. After Disney bought Fox, Marvel was put in charge of Alien comics because, you know, corporate synergy. Now this has included Aliens What If comics and even Aliens vs. Avengers.
Did you ever see this really old movie Aliens?
In addition to movies, TV, video games, novels, and comics, the Alien franchise, a Lovecraftian sci-fi body horror, has also spawned card games and board games along the way, including a 2019 D&D-like role-playing game. This game includes a lot of details from the Alien expanded universe and is, at worst, canon adjacent, if not canon. It draws from the movies as well as the Dark Horse comics and other media, even including the Wooden Monastery planet from the never-produced Alien 3 screenplay, as well as a planet named after Alien creator Dan O'Bannon. Finally, there's one other piece of Alien media that we absolutely cannot leave out of this video: Alien the Play. Alien the Play did not premiere on Broadway or off-Broadway or even off-Broadway. No, it was a drama club production played by high school students in New Jersey adapting the first movie, and it was amazing. The play quickly went viral and made national news, and Sigourney Weaver and James Cameron even thanked the students for their hard work. Ridley Scott also donated $5,000 so the students could put on an encore performance. So there's at least one happy ending in the Alien saga. With Alien Romulus and FX's Alien Earth and Marvel making new comics, the Alien franchise is not going anywhere anytime soon. To put in terms that Private First Class Hudson, played by the great late Bill Paxton, would understand, it is not game over, man. Just like the Xenomorphs themselves, the Alien franchise is nearly impossible to kill. Well guys, that is the definitive history of the Alien franchise. Is there anything you want to know about that we didn't mention? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.